James, that's one heck of a backdrop. It looks almost fake.
Not bad, is it? The Canadian Rockies, almost green screened, you would think. I can
Yeah.
assure you I'm not back home in DC, by the way.
But you're there for the G7, right in the heart of the action, right next to all the leaders.
Well, I'm right in the heart of an Airbnb at the moment, Mark. I have to tell you, and you'll know this from experience, we are nowhere near. They let us nowhere near the action. There's a media centre. Now, that's
Yeah.
about half an hour away.
Yeah.
Another half an hour away is where the action is, the politicians, in this sanitized bubble, free from inquiring questions from the likes of me and you.
Yeah,
Not right, is it?
doorstep James is not gonna do
Well,
very well over the next couple of days. You may as well be in front of a green screen in Georgetown, James.
well, yeah, I can assure you I'm not.
I'm Mark Stone,
And I'm James Matthews.
and it is Monday, the 16th of June, episode 133 of Trump 100, and day 147 of Trump's presidency, and it has been one heck of a weekend.
Yeah, we've got a lot to get through today. A bit later, we'll talk about a weekend that's rocked Minnesotans and the country after the assassination of one politician and her husband, and the attempted assassination of another and his wife. That was on Saturday morning, and at the time of recording, the gunman is still on the run. The manhunt has now crossed state lines.
And after the birthday military parade, President Trump is off for his first G7 summit of his second term amid protests at home and abroad, a fully fledged war between Iran and Israel. All eyes will be on the summit in what I reckon could be one of the most important weeks of his presidency so far. James, I want to talk in a moment about the sensational Sunday development that President Trump reportedly pulled Netanyahu back from assassinating Iran's supreme leader late last week. Huge news, and we'll get right into it all. But before we do, you're following the president this week to the G7 in Canada. Where are you exactly?
Well, I'm at a place called Kananaskis. Have you heard of it?
I have not. My Canadian geography, I have to admit, is not all that good. It's got better since I moved to the American continent, but it's still pretty terrible.
Yeah, well, I can tell you it's at the foot of the Canadian Rockies and, absolutely spectacular, unadulterated beauty here, just close to Alberta, Banff, close to obviously where this G7 summit's taking place in the south of Canada. It's not the first place, Kananaskis, on the lips of people's tongues necessarily when you say crucial global intergovernmental political forums. But this part of Canada, home to lakes, valleys, mountains, a fair few bears, and a few more grizzlies, of course, in town this week. Boom, boom. As the leaders of 14 of the biggest nations, plus the EU, NATO, the UN, and the World Bank get together. That's where I am right now, a hamlet of 133 people, temporarily the Diplo center of the world.
Goodness me. Well, I'm looking forward to watching it all play out. I think there are going to be so many dimensions to this G7. I mean, there always are to every
Yeah.
one, but this one feels like it could be a little different. So many different layers. Of course, Trump's first trip to Canada since all that, 51st state stuff came out of his mouth over the past few months. He's gone a bit quiet on the 51st state thing, but I suppose that's because there's so much else going on. But he comes to Canada to meet a new prime minister. They met before at the White House, I think, didn't they? But Mark Carney is the guy who comprehensively won this year's election in Canada, campaigning on an anti-Trump platform. But look, I think more broadly, I don't know if you would agree, but it feels like Trump, has proudly disrupted the world order. He has focused minds in capitals right around the world. He's forced countries to think about how they can look after themselves. In that context, it feels a bit to me like this is the G6 plus one.
It's going to be awkward, isn't it? Carney, Trump, Starmer, Macron. Trump will be schmoozing with the very people he's screwing on trade, undermining them on Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky's in town, incidentally. So is Cyril Ramaphosa, South African president. Veterans, both of the Trump hairdryer treatment in the Oval Office. And of course, front and center now of the agenda is the Middle East and where that goes from here. Key players, Starmer among them, talking about the importance of de-escalation. They're speaking with a single voice on that, but does that mean they'll leave with a single coordinated strategy? I wouldn't hold your breath, because the G7 starring Donald Trump these days, it's a different movie. This isn't a gathering built on common purpose, shared
Mm.
understanding, the like of which it used to be. Because remember, Trump, last time he met the G7 here in Canada, he ripped up the final communique on the plane on the way home. And he is no less abrasive this time round. I think reaching any kind of common strategy vis a vis the Middle East will be difficult in the immediate term, as it is in the long term, actually, because Trump is a man who has different ideas about a vision for that region. And, when this gathering doesn't agree on a destination for Gaza and more, then clearly it's complicated. Generally,
Mm.
I think, Mark, the whole dynamic here will be different. The center of gravity very much revolving around their US invitee. It will reflect the wider picture of a world coming to terms with Donald Trump and shaping its response accordingly.
Yeah, when geopolitics is functioning normally, these communiques, and you mentioned just now that the communique that Trump ripped up during the last G7 he was at, these communiques would be written in advance effectively. There might be tweaks when the leaders meet, but generally
Sure.
everything's agreed in advance. They then turn up and it's all kind of done and dusted. Absolutely not the case with Donald Trump. It gets much more exciting because literally anything could happen. And there's even been some reporting that the Canadian organisers have structured the scheduling of the G7 to limit Donald Trump's impact, ditching the usual joint communique and organising fewer plenary sessions, more one-to-one meetings that avoid all the world leaders having to sit round the same table at the same time. All of it designed to avoid any unwelcome, unwanted, or surprise encounter with the US president. I mean, pretty remarkable stuff.
It
You
is,
know,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the world's shifting to accommodate Donald Trump right down to the admin, political theater that actually you can't take your eyes off because it's so unpredictable, because he is so unpredictable. But clearly, Israel, Iran has to be addressed, will be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, a week ago, the G7 leaders did not expect that they would be focusing on this. They probably thought they were going to be focusing on Ukraine. But be in no doubt, we are right now in the middle of, or probably not even in the middle, in the early stages of the most dangerous, perilous moment for the Middle East in decades. It genuinely is. Iran and Israel are at war. This isn't just a series of attacks. This isn't a limited operation by Israel. This is a war. What has been remarkable for me is just how little Donald Trump has said about it since Israel launched its first attack on Thursday night. Just a few social media posts and snatched words with journalists, all of it filled with ambiguity, intentionally so, I think.
Yeah, he posted, didn't he, Mark, at midnight on Sunday morning after watching his military parade in DC, which we'll come to. But on Truth Social, he said the US had nothing to do with the attack on Iran tonight. If we are attacked in any way, shape, or form by Iran, the full strength and might of the US armed forces will come down on you at levels never seen before. However, he went on, we can easily get a deal done between Iran and Israel and end this bloody conflict.
What is interesting about that, I think he said the US had nothing to do with the attack on Iran tonight, but the fact that he's emphasized the word tonight suggests that maybe they did have something to do with the original attack on Thursday night into Friday. So I was struck by that part of that statement. But by Sunday morning, Trump had said that the two sides should, quote, make a deal, and they will make a deal. And White House officials have confirmed that earlier in the week, this is, get this, absolutely extraordinary. Trump told Netanyahu, do not assassinate Iran's supreme leader. Netanyahu, we know, is very keen on regime change. We'll talk about that. And it appears that Donald Trump put the brakes on that. So I think that is absolutely fascinating. And we've just heard, in fact, in the last few minutes as we've been recording, Donald Trump, on his way to Calgary, has been speaking on the South Lawn.
President, are you and Prime Minister Netanyahu on the same page concerning how to deal with Iran?
Well, we get along very well, and I will tell you that I think I have great respect for each other.
Can you give us a leader or solution?
Go ahead, what?
Mr. President, can you give us a sense of what you're doing to try to de-escalate the situation between Iran and Israel?
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
We've heard from Donald Trump too on social media extensively, actually, calling for a deal. You mentioned that, Mark. He said they should make a deal like the one he brokered between India and Pakistan. That's what he put on Truth Social. Now, there's a couple of things to say about that, not least questions over just how much Donald Trump was actually involved in that deal between the two of those countries. But something else, he speaks about using trade with the United States as leverage, as he did in the India-Pakistan agreement. He says it will bring reason, cohesion, and sanity into talks. I think, trade seems a long way from the heart of the matter at hand here. Israel and Iran, they see each other as an existential threat, with history, which they can invoke as hard evidence. There's also the matter of US diplomacy that's taken place over many months with the Iranians. If trade was the key to ending its nuclear ambitions, why wasn't trade front, center, and successful in negotiations before we got to this stage? Not for the first time. We're seeing a US president as the deal maker who cannot close a deal. There are tough questions facing Donald Trump about his performance as he comes here to Canada. I do wonder if ultimately that will force him to leave in a huff again.
Yeah, I mean, deeply naive, I think, is the phrase that comes to mind. This isn't, this Middle Eastern challenge is not something that can be solved with trade or real estate deals, because it is about ideology. It is about extreme governments on both sides, frankly. A couple of points to make here that I've been thinking about as we set to record this. First, I think we should be in no doubt that this war is about regime change. That is what Israel is trying to do in Iran, to fulfill a 30-year ambition. Second, Trump, the self-styled peacemaker president, has this weekend effectively said that America could be drawn into this Middle Eastern regime change war. That, James, I think, is remarkable and with truly unknown consequences. The third point I'd make is that Netanyahu started this, but he will need Trump to finish it, to help him with that diplomatic off-ramp if one exists. And so Trump, one way or the other, diplomatically or militarily, is going to be drawn into this, whether he likes it or not. And that brings me to the fourth point, because Trump is in a bind diplomatically. He is trying to thread the tightest of needles, but he's also in a bind with his MAGA crowd as well, because there are many within his circle who want nothing to do with Iran, and they do not want another faraway war with America involved. There is pressure there from influencers like Tucker Carlson and others who just think Donald Trump just mustn't get himself into this.
On Trump vetoing the assassination attempt on the Ayatollah Khamenei, Netanyahu's actually denied that. He's been on Fox News this morning. Well, when I say deny, he hasn't completely dismissed it, but the phrase he used was false reports about discussions between the US and Israel. It was a kind of non-dismissal dismissal. But I think with what we've heard from the US officials relating to that Trump veto, there's a reason why these things get leaked to the media. And I think in this instance, Trump is sending a message, which we have seen him do in the past couple of days. A man who is wielding the carrot and the stick. He's saying to Tehran, look, regime change. Israel is hell bent on that. It's in my gift. It's in my power to make that happen or not. So inherent in that is, a Trump warning and a Trump stronger warning. There's also the business mark of, you mentioned Capitol Hill. Both on both sides of the aisle, there are those who would indeed push for regime change in Iran. It's what they want. So Trump is under competing pressures from his base and from many in Congress.
I was at a lunch on Capitol Hill in December, late December, and it was being hosted by the exiled Iranian opposition who are here in Washington. And I was really struck that the people there, the Congress people there, and the representatives were from both sides of the aisle. You had the likes of Ted Cruz calling for regime change in Iran, and Cory Booker, Democrat, on the other side, very far away politically from Ted Cruz, also talking about regime change in Iran. Very interesting stuff. So there is pressure on the Hill for Trump to do it. There is pressure from his MAGA base to not.
Mark, there's been a fair bit to deal with back at home or on mainland USA over the weekend. Following protests, they sprouted up across the country in response to a rare military parade. Not something really that you see every day or even every year in America, the sight of tanks rolling down Constitution Avenue at the heart of American democracy, with the president standing, saluting as thousands of soldiers marched on by. But that is exactly what we saw on Saturday, wasn't it? As the country celebrated the 250th anniversary of the creation of the US Army.
Yeah, I was down there for the spectacle. It was quite the show, quite the journey through history as well, from Washington's army right the way through to the modern day fighters of today. Even robo dogs, James, marching down the road there. It was
Spooky.
quite, yeah, it was a little spooky actually. I'd never seen a robo dog in real life, but there we go. In what is perhaps a neat coincidence, the parade was not just the 250th birthday of the US Army, but it was a certain somebody's 79th birthday as well. Donald Trump started his day with a phone call from Moscow, Putin wishing him a happy birthday. Bizarre, you may say, but these are strange times, aren't they? Most of the 50-minute call was taken up with discussions on Iran, but then it was a 1-minute motorcade down to the mall for the birthday party. And the big question riling America is whether all of what we watched unfold was perfectly all-American or actually totally un-American. Was it a sort of vulgar, jingoistic show? And above all, what was its purpose and why spend $45 million doing this? Was it to celebrate the Army's birthday or the president's birthday? Look, James, honestly, on the ground there, and we spent the whole time there talking to loads of people, among the crowd, it was very much the former. It was a celebration of the Army, and it felt, although there were, of course, Trump hats there, the red MAGA caps were there, and I'm sure many of the people, probably most, were people who voted for Trump. Notwithstanding that, the event itself, for me, in the crowd, felt apolitical.
I'm here to support the military, for sure. Politically, I have nothing to say.
There's going to be a war sometime in the next few years, and patriotism counts for a whole lot. Without it, you're lost.
This is the 250th birthday of the United States Army. There's no one here that's saying that this is about Trump. We don't see this. Tank soldiers is about the United States Army. It's not a political event. People want to politicize it. Too bad for them.
For all the talk of this being some sort of a political stunt by Donald Trump to celebrate his birthday, it really doesn't feel like that here among the crowds. From those we've spoken to, they're here to celebrate the birthday of the Army, not the president.
All I've seen on the internet is like the size of the crowd stuff.
They were expecting 250,000 people to turn up. Stephen Chung, Donald Trump's press man, said that he thought that there were that many. I don't think so. And certainly the organizers don't think so either. A smaller number. Put that down to the rain or something else. I don't know. But it certainly was not quite the number that they had expected. Trump, though, in his speech, he wasn't focusing on politics. He appeared uncharacteristically, I thought, to be non-political.
Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you to Vice President Vance. And thank you to our wonderful First Lady. And above all, thank you to the greatest, fiercest, and bravest fighting force ever to stride the face of this earth, the United States Army. Thank you very much. Because our soldiers never give up, never surrender, and never, ever quit. They fight, 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 and they win, win, win.
So I guess, James, for me, despite all the talk of Trump hijacking the event to tickle his own authoritarian tendencies, the strong vibe there was that this was a celebration of the Army. But here's the thing. The moment was captured in images that can be framed accordingly over time. And with a certain framing, President Trump could easily be presented as more than just the president or the commander-in-chief. Critics are clearly framing him as a wannabe dictator, and allies of his will happily use these images to present him as all-powerful.
That comes at a time, of course, when Trump's authoritarian streak, as some would see it, the deployment of the National Guard, in California, the ignorance of judicial orders defying the Constitution as they would have it. And of course, across the country, we've seen this No Kings protests. They were huge, 1,500 protests in towns and cities across the US, involving hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, really, really huge and almost all peaceful. A couple of instances of tear gas being fired, I think in Atlanta, Georgia, and also in Los Angeles. But otherwise in cities in states like Pennsylvania, New York, Texas, and more, a huge peaceful movement of people drawn to the streets to protest against the president. This is the first and the largest movement we have seen against President Trump in his second term. So we'll see how it develops over the weeks and months ahead. Now, incidentally, James, talking about military parades and what some see as dictatorial tendencies, I was lucky enough back in 2013 to go to Pyongyang, North Korea, to Kim Jong-un's parade, the real deal. It really was the most extraordinary moment, the most extraordinary event I think I've ever been to. Thousands of goose-stepping soldiers marching in sync, so many marching at the same time that the road underneath us was literally vibrating as they went. Missiles, rocket launchers, as well as tanks and jeeps. It truly was quite extraordinary. And I think having been to now the Washington parade and the one in Pyongyang, I think I can safely say that proper dictators they do it better. We've put a link in the show notes to the film we made at the time in 2013 from North Korea. So do have a watch of that. Now to a story that would, without question, be the headline, but isn't because there is so much going on. The assassination in Minnesota, a tragic story from the northeastern state of Minnesota, the first political assassination in the US in a decade.
That's right, Mark. And just as we're recording this, actually, there are reports from local media that the man who's been on the run for almost 48 hours is now in police custody. He's alleged to have shot and killed Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark, and to have attempted the murder of State Senator John Hoffman and his wife.
Yeah, he has been named, though, the principal suspect in this shooting, still on the run. He's been named as Vance Bolter, an evangelical anti-abortion rights conservative who worked for a security company and had access to police-like vehicles. It's thought he is thought to be the man who, dressed like a peace officer, came out of Hortman's home and shot at police before escaping. He had been driving what appeared to be a police car. Investigators found a hit list of nearly 70 other names in the suspect's car, mostly Democrats or figures with ties to abortion rights.
Yeah, Mark, just to briefly explain the roles of State Representative Hortman and State Senator Hoffman, the way US politics is structured is that federal laws, the ones that make up the whole country's legal system, they're constructed, debated, and voted on by the US House of Representatives and US senators in the state capitol, in which there are state house representatives and state senators who debate, make, and vote on laws specific to their state. Melissa Hortman, she was one of the most senior and important Democrats in the state house in Minnesota, having been Speaker for 6 years and a minority leader this year. Senator Hoffman, he's been a member of the Minnesotan Senate for 12 years. Now, both him and his wife, they survived the attack with his wife. Truly terrible moment in the history of Minnesotan politics. And Governor Tim Walz, who you'll remember was Kamala Harris's running mate last year, he's condemned the attack.
We're here today because an unspeakable tragedy has unfolded in Minnesota. My good friend and colleague, Speaker Melissa Hortman, and her husband Mark were shot and killed early this morning in what appears to be a politically motivated assassination. Our state lost a great leader, and I lost a dearest of friends. Speaker Hortman was someone who served the people of Minnesota with grace, compassion, humor, and a sense of service. She was a formidable public servant, a fixture and a giant in Minnesota. She woke up every day determined to make this state a better place.
Yes, of course. He knew both these politicians very well. He's also taken to social media, posting a picture of Representative Hortman accompanied with the sentence, "the most consequential speaker in state history." We'll be keeping a very close eye on developments as authorities race to track down the suspect's whereabouts. Donald Trump has also been asked about the shooting. He called it absolutely terrible. A man who, of course, has been the subject to multiple assassination attempts himself. That said, there is some frustration and disappointment in Minnesota because it doesn't appear that he has yet called Governor Walz to offer condolences and support. Right, James, we had to stop recording a couple of times because you kept getting caught in patches of Canadian rain.
Yeah.
Ever heard of a brolly?
Well, you know what? Yeah, keen-eyed viewers will have noticed me creeping in from the balcony. But Mark, listen, see the luggage we have to carry when we fly. I mean, it needs a team of Sherpas at the best of times, and that's just for my sedan chair. So anyway, there's two of us. A brolly would have been the straw that literally broke the camel's back.
Well, you know what? The brollies was the second most interesting thing that happened to me yesterday, because our brolly got taken away from us going into the parade in Washington because it had a sharp point at the end. So the Secret Service said, "You're not allowed that." That was only the second strangest thing that happened to me. The strangest.
I was going to say that wasn't the only sharp point made to you yesterday.
Well, quite right, James. The sharpest point made to me was by a slightly irritating heckler who chose to not listen to a word I was saying and instead picked out one word that I did say out of context. It sort of spiraled out of control, and I did my best to try and get it back into some sort of sense of order. Have a listen.
Across the country, the slogan at thousands of protests was "No Kings." And the central...
We're not an autocracy. We're not an autocracy, asshole.
The central pillar of his foreign policy, peace through strength.
No, I'm an autocracy.
Are you not listening to a word I'm saying?
I heard. I understand English. And you're here to call us autocrats.
My friend,
we're not.
You didn't hear the end.
And we're not friends.
Right, okay. Sir, you didn't hear the end of what I said. I'm presenting what the protesters are saying and what other people are saying.
You said parades and stuff happen in democracies and autocracies.
Factually true.
Clearly, the implication is that Donald Trump...
What's your name?
I'm Bill.
I'm Mark. Nice to meet you. How are you doing? Okay, let's just let me speak for a sec, right? If you had not been shouting, if you'd listened to the rest of what I said,
what I was shouting is that we're not an autocracy.
I know you're not. I didn't say you were. Let me finish, okay? I was presenting the view of the protesters, of which there are thousands, tens of thousands around the country. I then presented the other view, Donald Trump's view, that this is about feel good, it's about feel powerful, it's about America first, it's about peace through strength. If you hadn't been shouting, you'd have heard me say that. Bill, have a good day.
We're not an autocracy.
I didn't say you were.
You were using the rhetoric and the language.
So there we are, Bill and me on the Washington Mall. James, we will leave you to go and get dry. Enjoy the days ahead.
Yeah, cheers. And a message to hecklers everywhere. Don't think if you heckle us, you're going to get on the Trump 100 podcast. Just Bill on the National Mall. But yeah, thanks for being with us on today's episode of Trump 100. Thank you for listening. And if you want to get in touch, you can do at trump100sky.uk. Email us, don't heckle us.
Yeah, you know the routine. Send us your questions if you haven't already. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. Leave us a comment or review. We love reading them, even the hecklers. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.